Welcome to the Disciples of the Watch podcast with your hosts, Gene Vogel and Nate Matnich.
Disciples, welcome back to another fantastic episode of the Disciples of the Watch podcast.
In this episode, we're going to work our way from worst to best on Testament's full-length studio albums. I'm Nate Matnich.
And I'm Gene Vogel. Thank you for joining us for volume number 22 of our worst to best series. Nate, I got a couple things I want to get up before we get into the deep of it, but anything that we need to catch up on before we send off and begin on our journey onto Testament's catalog?
Not a ton. I wanted to mention that I saw the new Beetlejuice last night. It was pretty cool. I thought it was worth seeing. So yeah, that was fun. And I'm heading out for Minneapolis next Tuesday. So I'm looking forward to traveling up. Yeah, that's about it, man. What are you up to? What did you have going on?
A little bit of chaos at work. We got they asked the president to step down, and then they brought in the president who hired me to come back for a few months until they could get a replacement for him yet again. So this will be the third president in I don't know how many years. Yeah, he was there for 20 some years. We'll see what happens. I haven't had much conversation. It's been a lot of scrambling to what projects are on my plate and how can we move them forward. And it's been awesome because he's just, instead of giving me direction, he's grabbing things and like, okay, let's get meetings. And he's setting up the meetings. And it's like, holy crap, I forgot how nice it is having an effective leader. And right. I am bummed that he's not going to stick around, but I understand he retired for a reason. He wants to enjoy he's got a house in Puerto Rico. That's what he wants to be. He comes here, of course, he's got family in Oklahoma. That's where he's originally from, and family up here in the Twin Cities area. So he still has a house here in this area where I live. So therefore, it's not like he's not here, but come wintertime, he ain't going to want to stick around this joint. He wants to get back to Puerto Rico and enjoy that freaking kick-ass weather. Just got to avoid the storms. But yeah, other than that, it's just been a little bit of that and podcast work. And I did my KFAI, my first appearance as far as leading the show. However, it wasn't quite there because Mara the Death had a band scheduled. So she was kind of still running the show, even though I programmed the majority of the music. So we threw in a few things in there, got some requests, threw those in there. And the band was awesome. Living Through Ghosts, by the way. Check them out if you're into doom metal. They're the Twin Cities. And the funny thing is I know the guitar player because he's there at KFAI every once in a while, and they were asking, or somebody was pointing me in the direction saying, hey, these guys could use a singer. And in a way, I'm kind of bummed that I didn't realize they were doom metal and maybe try to spread my wings a little bit or, stretch myself, see if I could do a good doom metal voice. But they have the singer, God dang it, why am I blanking on her name? Felicia. She's been in a few different bands in the Twin Cities. She's in Black Rainbow, which is a Rainbow/Black Sabbath tribute. And her voice with what they're doing would probably be better than anything I would have done, even though I'd love the opportunity. I should have taken the opportunity to at least tried it out. But because I didn't take up the opportunity laid before me, they got a better singer, and people were gravitating towards it. So it was phenomenal. There is a replay on the show for maybe another week. I forget how long they have them up there, but definitely really cool to check out. You don't have to listen to the music. Don't listen to me talking. Just go right to the live performance. It'll be well worth your time. Somewhere at the 2 a.m. hour-ish. I think we play Iron Maiden's song, and then it goes right into the band for like 30 to 40 minutes. Good stuff, by the way. Highly recommend it. So yeah, other than that, I'm looking forward to getting into the Testament thing now. A brief bit for me. I got into Testament fairly early. I got into them before I got into Slayer, definitely. The ballad, that song alone was what hooked me, seeing that played on MTV. But I never really got deep, even though I was buying their material through the years. It wasn't until later on that I realized, wow, I really dig these guys. As I'm buying like Low and The Gathering, and I'm kind of keeping up with their discography, that I had to kind of work my way back because I started at Practice and went forward and never really went backwards until many years later. I think it was New Order on cassette, but never really paid much attention to it. I think I was already moving on. I was kind of caught up in the big four, eventually Slayer, of course. It was the big three in my brain, and then eventually got into Slayer, but never really, they were always like a C-level band to me. How about you? What's your experience?
I started listening to them at the Practice What You Preach era as well. And the ballad is probably the song that first grabbed my attention, and it's still my favorite Testament song for sure. I didn't consider them one of my favorites or anything like that. They didn't get as much play as a lot of other stuff that I was into.
Yeah, I got you. I'm right there with you.
And even now going back, they have songs that are really kick-ass. And then for having albums that only have, like 9 or 10 songs on it, there's still some filler on some of those.
Yes. But you know what? And that's a good point. And I would strongly agree with that statement. However, it's a filler that when you're passively listening to it, it's still good. It's one of those things that you could put on, work around the house, and you're going to get those songs that grab your attention, of course. But the rest of it's going to kind of flow. So that's why the albums aren't like complete stinkers. They have stinker songs here and there, but they've got a lot of like C-level material that keeps it at least worth your time and worth buying.
Yeah, their albums are good. No doubt about it.
I think there's only one song in their discography that I have to skip, and we'll get to that when we get to the album. But the rest of it, I enjoy.
I'm going to write down what I think that is.
Okay. I think you know what that is. we worked this album.
I think I do, but I don't remember. I think I have the same feelings about it, but we'll see.
Fabulous. Yeah. We'll get to that when it comes time. And one thing I noticed too, is I was gathering all the different sources to use for the episode. There is a pretty broad variety of fandom that we are experiencing here. It's not, like Metallica where people are going to be like arguing between Master of Puppets and Ride the Lightning. This is a broader brush that I was kind of surprised to experience. In my stupid brain, I thought people were more along the lines with what I would be experiencing. Just some certain differences, of course. We always experience that. An album will grab somebody and we'll probably be like, wow, that person really likes that one, but maybe it's not a stinker. There's a variety going on here, and we'll get to that when we get to the notes. But I know you saw that with the core list that we're going to be using, that it seemed to be a little bit off track of what you were experiencing.
Yeah, it's way different than mine. And I didn't know what to expect when I read through it, but I was pretty surprised. And then you had commented that there's a lot of variety in the different lists that you looked at. So I'm curious where the other people came in.
Yeah. And I've been kind of chomping at the bit to get to this episode because I'd be curious what kind of conversation we're going to have based on the information that I found. Now, one thing I found a couple things that I wanted to bring into this episode instead of saving it for like a news episode, because it's very ties in with, the whole Testament discussion here. There has been obviously talk that they're going to be doing a new album, and Eric Peterson had revealed that they do have a producer. They're using renowned Swedish producer Jens Bogren to mix the highly anticipated follow-up to their 2020 release, Titans of Creation. Gosh, 2020. Here we are, 2024. Nate, I wonder if this will be up at the end.
Yeah, we're already getting near the end of this year.
This year has flown by, our 10th year celebration year, and it's already in end of September, man. Holy buckets. Now, I know the band's been working with Andy Sneap, but obviously Andy's busy with Judas Priest and working, with their albums and stuff. So he asked for some time off, and, according to Peterson, he thought it was a good time to make a switch anyhow. So there's some crazy stuff on there. He said he's excited to hear it. And then Chuck Billy, just today, was again on Blabbermouth. Well, he wasn't, but they were pulling a piece. He probably had like an hour interview, and he just said one sentence that they're going to grab. Nate, I know you're big on that. But he's saying that it sounds new and modern and fresh. Any feelings on that title right there, Nate? New, modern, and fresh.
Well, I think they've done pretty good with keeping their, core sound or whatever and still managing to sound modern. So I'll be curious and open-minded.
Yes, I'm going into it with an open mind as well. Oh, he even mentions this, and I did add this in here, that he was asked about the writing process, and he was, between the band's early days in the 90s, and he said, or how it has changed since the late 80s, late 90s and all that. He said, it's night and day. Before, back then, we all lived the same place. We all had to go to the same studio. Now it's by email, sharing the songs. Everybody has home studios to work out demos. Definitely a different writing process, but still, Eric Peterson, the Testament guitarist, is one of the main writers. And ever since we brought in our new drummer, Chris Dovas, he's been there 2 years. So he's 24 when he came into the band. So he's 26 now, but he's a smart kid. He graduated from the Berklee College of Music. He knows theory and is great in the studio with Pro Tools. He's really into modern bands and new and upcoming stuff. And he's got an old soul, so he knows the history of the music. But I think him working hand in hand with Eric, as long as they did, he really pushed Eric and drove Eric to get challenged. And I would say copy, But I think Chris and what he listens to and the style Eric likes, it's brought an influence to our new songs. Now that is interesting because I'm curious, is this going to taint that Testament sound that we kind of become, very aware of, or is it pushing the band into a positive new direction? What are your thoughts on that, Nate?
I don't know. Time will tell. They have a pocket that they are in when they sound the best. And, we'll talk about this more obviously, but the stuff in the 90s where they kind of deviated their sound, to me, that was a big loss. That they're really good with like Alex Skolnick.
Yes.
Which I see Eric as the main songwriter. However, them losing Alex completely changed this band in a way that for me was not as intriguing or interesting. Not that the other stuff isn't, good pieces of metal, but it doesn't have any of the flair that Alex brings to the band. So for me, that pocket that they're in with him, their first 5 albums and then their last 4 albums, I hope they don't deviate too far. But as I said, they have managed to keep it interesting and fresh sounding, but still sticking with the Testament sound as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, I agree very much. I hope it's a positive piece. When Bittner joined Overkill, it just carried forth with the killer stuff they were already doing in the more recent years since 2010. And hopefully this is just building upon that. And one thing you got to remember too, back in the 90s, they were also battling the record labels in the whole grunge explosion. And so they've kind of tweaked their formula a little bit, but eventually, grunge would run its course like so many other genres before, punk, hair metal, et cetera, et cetera. So, new metal was on the rise. And then eventually, Alex came back, and I feel like, I guess getting a little ahead of myself, but I do feel like it was a return to the Testament that we enjoyed previous.
I agree with that totally.
And the last thing I want to mention before we move on to the list is Steve DiGiorgio will be back on bass for this new album. So stay tuned. And then Nate will have to just do another one of these and see where this fits in, or at least we'll have to have a discussion on where this new album fits in our personal top 12s. Now, that is the thing. There are 12 albums. That was one difficulty I had, is a lot of people had 10 albums 11 albums. And it's like, nobody updated their lists. It was always I found a bunch that ended 11. Nobody had went to Titans of Creation and included that into their to update. So as far as lists on on news sites that we tend to lean towards, this was very YouTube heavy. So a lot of people took their list to YouTube and then those were updated. So we have our master list, and then all the other lists other than Nate and I's will be from YouTube sources. And I didn't want to pull any, random Reddit lists or anything like that. People putting together personal lists. I wanted people with more skin in the game that have, subscribers and they're putting forth an effort instead of some jack off, not, really going through and digging deep and putting his heart and soul into a top list. Just somebody off the cuff, just going, best album is this and the worst album is this, then I'll just fill in everything in between. I mean, if you're knee deep in Testament and that's your blood, if that's as deep for you as it is for, some people with Metallica and stuff, then, you might be able to pull that off. But I still want people who are going to put forth the work. That's why we tend to go to sites, like Loudwire and et cetera, et cetera. And in this case, Metal Nation. But YouTubers, they put forth the work, and they're putting their face in front of the camera, and they're spilling the beans on how they feel on the albums, or spilling their guts, I should say. And I feel it has a little more weight to it. So as I mentioned, we got Metal Nation. Oh, shoot, I was going to put the dude's name in here. I did not do that. Eric Tim with 2 M's is the author, and this was updated. Of course, it was originally written. It was originally written in May 25 of 2010. So this was after the 12th album had come out. So very fresh in Eric's ranking. All right, coming at number 12, Souls of Black from 1990. So this is, in his opinion, the worst of the albums. And here's what he has to say on this. In this writer's not so humble opinion, this is easily Testament's worst album. While there are some cool songs, I think this album could be cut down to a strong EP. The album starts off strong with the flamenco acoustic piece that is beginning of the end and tears right into Face in the Sky. So at first it seems as if Testament is still in top form. Unfortunately, things sort of falter as the album progresses into what seems to be a bit of a predictable paint-by-numbers thrash album. The whole midsection of the record is nothing truly gripping. I've never met any Testament fan online or in the real world who would cite songs like Love to Hate or Malpractice as an underrated gem in the band's repertoire. Even by the band's own admissions, this one was a bit undercooked. So in comparison to the rest of their catalog, it has difficulty holding up. The band does feature the band's seminal lineup of vocalist Chuck Billy, drummer Louis Clemente, bassist Greg Christensen, and guitarists Eric Peterson and Alex Skolnick. I threw a little inflection on that Eric there. Eric. Just for you, Nate. I was a little...
Nice. I'm sure that's how it's
a little
originally
European
said.
flair there. So, Souls of Black at number 12, according to Metal Nation. Nate, I had Souls of Black at number 4. Not nearly as bad.
Not me either. I was at number 4.
Look at us being all simpatico.
I mean, he's not wrong about it being it would be a stronger EP.
You can say that about a lot of Testament.
But I did like it when it came out, and I enjoyed it when it came out. I remember I had the tour T-shirt and stuff. The bass line to Souls of Black,
is
fucking cool as hell.
That alone shouldn't be make it worth or being at the bottom of the barrel for the holy buckets. And yeah, he's right. There are a lot of like so numbers, a lot of C-level pieces on here, but Souls of Black and The Legacy, come on.
Yeah, they're masterful with ballad type songs.
Agreed. We've said it before.
I mean, for a thrash ballad, they're fucking the best. And they've got a handful of them.
Metallica could take a note or two from these guys.
Word.
All right, well, here's the other contributors. We got Ruthless Metal. I think we've featured them before. Quest for Metal, and those I don't recall. This one definitely. Darcy, 6 Strings, 9 Lives. Injustice for Earl, and Metal Music Meltdown. They're all their contributors here. So, Ruthless Metal has number 5. Quest for Metal, number 5. Darcy at number 10. It's a little bit closer to our core list here. Injustice for Earl at number 6. And Metal Music Meltdown at 3M7. So that averages at 6.63, which gives it a new rank of 7, jumping up 5 spots, Nate.
That's unacceptable.
Yeah, I'm more comfortable at number 7 than number 12.
Oh yeah, totally. 12 is pretty harsh.
I bet you if that Darcy 6 Strings would have given a little bit better rating, because you look at that, we got a 4, 4, 5, 5, 6, 7, and then a 10 and a 12, and that 10 and 12 just kind of sinks it a little bit, but definitely more respectable than a 12.
All right, number 11, we got The Legacy from 1987, and the reviewer says, what was his name again?
I remember his last name is Tim.
All right, so
Eric.
According to Eric, his ranking is number 11, and he says, Testament's debut album. In all honesty, this album, basically interchangeable with Souls of Black as far as holding the bottom slot. While I'm sure this album holds a lot of fond memories for the band and for the people who lived alongside them in the 80s, the fact is that this is a band in its infancy. Songs like Over the Wall, First Strike Deadly, and Alone in the Dark are classic thrash tunes that still get some rotation in the band's live set. But the other side is that this is a group that had yet to realize its potential. They would go on to produce a much better material, and with extremely dated production, it makes it difficult to truly enjoy this record without a sense of nostalgia for the time. However, because it's a first effort, and that does not provide a sense of nostalgia and raw youthful naivety, it inches slightly above Souls of Black.
So number 11, Nate.
Well, I've got it at number 5.
Number 5. Damn. Well, you're not alone. I'm alone. I'm almost as bad as the original list. I'm at number 9. So just a couple points off, but Ruthless Metal at number 2, Quest for Metal number 2, Darcy 6 Strings number 1, Injustice for Earl number 1, Metal Music Meltdown at number 3. Averages out to 4.25, which gives it a new rank of jumping 8 slots from the original list up to number 3. A much more respectable number 3, although I could see it further down the list on my, of course, on mine. But it's almost the same kind of situation we had higher, where although we got number 1s here where we didn't have number 1s on Souls of Black. it definitely jumps up and has a little bit more respect than what the initial reviewer gave it.
It does sound dated.
Yes.
And it totally reminds me of all of the thrash bands first.
Yes.
Like Overkill's Feel the Fire. And we've got The Legacy from Testament. And then, of course, Anthrax, Fistful of Metal, Slayer's Show No Mercy, Megadeth's Killing's My Business. The kind of the outlier, I guess, would be Kill 'Em All, because that was already a better produced and a little more contained sounding, where the rest of these were a little more raw and edgy. But even though they all sound different, there's a sameness to all those first albums that all these thrash bands were doing.
Yes.
And then they kind of found their stride. On the second album, they all started to kind of go off in their own direction, in my opinion. But I don't know, it holds up for me. I like that era of thrash, and it's probably somewhat nostalgic just from growing up and hearing this stuff when it was new. And these guys were a little bit late to the thrash scene compared to the bigger titans.
Yeah, 87.
This first album being 87.
Yeah. Did you mention Fistful of Metal in your tirade there? Okay, I wasn't sure if that was one you mentioned. I was thinking Bonded by Blood was another.
Yep, that fits into that scope too.
All right, up next, 2016's Brotherhood of the Snake at number 10. Putting Brotherhood of the Snake this far down on the list might piss a few people off, and it pains me to do so because I really had high hopes for this record, but I just don't find a lot of material here worth visiting. That was a strong word for me there, or weak word, material. This album is a lot like Souls of Black in that it starts off really strong, but it starts to dip down toward the middle of the album, and by the end it just seems like it's dragging on with material that seemed kind of been there, done that. Echoing the same kind of problem with Souls of Black, I feel this album could trim the fat and turn itself into a fucking killer EP, but feels bloated as a half length. Despite Chuck Billy's voice being in deadly shape, songs like Blackjack and Cannabusiness have some straight up cheesy lyrics. Amen, brother. On a more positive note, Chuck's voice is fucking awesome and the lead guitar work is top notch. Brotherhood of the Snake has all the right parts to be one of their best albums, but it is configured in a way that it doesn't seem to connect like one might hope. Brotherhood of the Snake, number 10. I have it as my worst at number 12. Nate?
I'm at number 11 on this one.
So we're pretty close on that. Ruthless Metal, number 9. Quest for Metal, number 8. Darcy Six Strings, number 11. And Justice for Earl, number 8. Metal Music Meltdown, number 10. It averages 9.88. It actually drops a slot to number 11. Now, I had it ranked the worst, and Quest for Metal and Injustice for Earl had it at the best at number 8. So, that's all right in the same wheelhouse, man. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, we got them all covered.
Yeah. I'm glad that we're all kind of in the same page on this one. Because, I like the most of the theme. There's... they described it as they kind of pulled it from the Ancient Aliens program on TV, a lot of the lyrical content.
Yes.
And I like all that stuff, like about reptilian races and all these ancient civilizations and aliens and different portals and all that shit, So the fact that they kind of were singing about it, I like that piece of it, and it kind of made me want to go back and hear it again. But now seeing that everybody's kind of ranked it the same, I'm feeling a little bit more like, maybe I'm not missing out.
Yeah, you're going to go to the mine. You're not going to find gold at this point. It's what you heard is what you heard.
Is this the album that has the song?
It is. It's Cannabusiness.
Okay. That's what I had written down, and I also have notes that it sounds so like forced or contrived, I guess the word is.
It just sounds amateur.
That reminds me about Chuck Billy. Now, vocally, with his lyrics and the music, I feel like it all blends really well on their later albums. But sometimes, even on their earlier albums, I felt like, I don't feel like there's a lot of conviction in what he's singing about, and the fact that they have political lyrics and stuff like that, and then there's no conviction behind it, like a punk rock song or a hip-hop song or something that's really hard-hitting that way. And as far as the political stuff, I feel that way about thrash metal in general. And a lot of bands like Sacred Reich and even Metallica and stuff, people have touched on all these different political themes, and it really just falls flat in metal for me for some reason. Like there isn't a real conviction behind it, you know what I mean? But anyways, Can of Business is a terrible song. And there's so many good Marijuana songs out there, like Rick James' Mary Jane, or SZA's Marijuana, or Black Sabbath's Sweet Leaf, you know what I mean? And this should not be on the record at all.
Yeah, I think Chuck Billy can write some great lyrics. And I think this one was almost like he just didn't have, like you said, the conviction. He wanted to say something, but I don't think he could find the right way to say it. So he just wrote a paint by numbers song that would have been great if you're playing this to your local friends at a local club. But putting it on an album like this it just sinks it, man. That's the worst rated song in this whole thing for me. And like I said, it's one of the only songs, probably the only Testament song, when I hear it, I have to jam that button to hit next because it's like, ugh, yeah. God, it just fucking annoys me. But yeah, and he's right. This album does start off strong. Those first 3 songs are like, oh yeah, this is pretty nice. Then all of a sudden it just kind of starts to fade. And then Can of Business just, ugh. And then again, maybe it makes the number game a stronger song because you just suffered through that. Or you had to go, oh crap, where's the button? You got to fast forward through this. Or, you know, if you're not anywhere near the stereo, you got to suffer it through it.
I'd be curious to know somebody who actually likes that song.
I don't know if I want to be in a room with somebody who likes that song.
Yeah.
I don't trust them. You know, take the fillings out of your teeth and try to sell them to a pawn shop. That kind of person when you're sleeping. Knock you out.
All right, number 9, we've got Dark Roots of Earth, 2012. Eric says, Dark Roots of Earth is a good Testament album. All the songs are cool, classic Testament style, but at the same time, none of them really seem to stand out as mandatory listening, with maybe the exception of Throne of Thorns, which has a vibe similar to the music on Demonic. Testament are often guilty of front-loading their albums with the best songs on side A and very few surprises on side B. This is one of the only times the band buried one of the best songs on the backside of the album. Again, none of the songs are bad, but there's not a lot of exploration either. I don't think there's a single song on this record that I would show to someone first, discovering the band, as a way to entice them to listen further. The band obviously knows what they were doing and what their fans look for in a Testament record, but it seems like a lot of it is on autopilot. However, this album is probably the best cover artwork in their whole discography, so that's something.
I agree with that.
This was pretty surprising for me when I was going through the ranking, and I almost questioned it, but I decided I'm leaving it because I actually really love this album. I have it at number 2.
I'm actually surprised I'm not closer to you because I knew I liked this album, but when it all shook out, I had to go at number 5 with it. But definitely it's a top 5 worthy Testament for sure. And I could even see, I'm curious, I don't remember. Oh, that's right, I had it. Or no, I'm sorry. This one was a tiebreaker one that we had to figure out a tie break. And it's funny because I had all the numbers out until I got yours, and everything was sorted. But as soon as I plugged your numbers in, you created the tiebreaker. And based on your ranking and my ranking on both the albums that were in question, this one got bumped up to the higher rank in the overall as a tiebreaker. So I'm kind of getting a little bit ahead of myself there. But yes, for me, it was a strong album. Dark Roots of Earth is like it is a home run song for me. It has to be played every time they play it live. And there's a lot of good things on here. As far as that getting into that B level, C level, this rises above, some of those other albums. And is for cover to cover, much stronger of a release. So I have it starts at number 9. I have it number 5. You at number 2. Ruthless Metal number 8. Number 7 for Quest Metal. Darcy 9 right there at number 9 with the original list. Injustice for Earl kind of in between you and I at number 4. And Metal Music Meltdown at number 8. A lot of high numbers on that one, Nate. I was a little surprised. I thought for sure we'd unite as a Testament fan base and go, Dark Roots of Earth is higher, it's top 5 for sure. And I was proven wrong. We got a couple 9s and 8, a couple 8s, a 7, but you and I brought the average up and used it as a tiebreaker. And the new rank brings it in at number 5, jumping 4 spots.
For all the stuff that's come out since Formation of Damnation is when I started buying Testament albums as they came out again, or listening to them at least. This one I continued to listen to I kept wanting to go back and hear it again. And then you gave me a copy of it on vinyl. So, yeah, this one just really grabbed me. And it is classic Testament. I guess that's why, because I like when they're in their pocket, man. That's when they're their best. So, and they're in their pocket on this one.
I agree, and that's why I was surprised that there was so much variance in this one. But that's what I was finding. I wasn't like seeking out people to reaffirm what my thoughts were. I was going into it expecting people to be more simpatical with where you and I are. I mean, and you and I are even a little bit off, 2 and 5. But I guess knowing what the numbers were before we started recording, I was still like, wow, I'm surprised that there's such a broad, and this one doesn't get as much love as I was expecting. But we're going to have a few of those surprises in this episode, so buckle up. And I agree with that statement. I don't know if I mentioned that. The album art is phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
Looks even better on 12-inch.
Super cool. Yeah, definitely.
All right, coming in at number 8 is 1997's Demonic. Testament's 7th studio album is a bit of an anomaly and shows the band in a strong but awkward transition phase. Released in 1997, the band was caught in that mid-90s struggle where heavy metal was considered to be on its deathbed. The group is trying to retain its thrash roots while progressing into the more modern, groove-laden death metal influence displayed on 1994's previous album, Low. On the downside, the band was at a financial low point, having just come out of their major label dealings with Atlantic Records, and this is the first album to not feature original bassist Greg Christensen. Guitarist James Murphy of Death and Obituary fame, who had replaced Skolnick for 2 albums in the mid-90s, had also exited the band, leaving Peterson handling basically all of the guitar duties himself. On the upside, this was the first album to feature Gene, the Atomic Clock Hoagland, on drums. I think this album is overall quite underrated among Testament fans, which generally comes from people saying they weren't a fan of how Chuck Billy leaned into the death metal vocal style so hard on this album. However, some of the songs here are Testament at their heaviest. Demonic Refusal, Together as One, Jun Jun, Hatred's Rise, and New Eyes of Old are all killer songs. If you listen closely, you can hear how Randy Bly of Lamb of God drew a lot of sound from what Chuck did here. It's a very unique record, to say the least. I actually have to set a personal preference aside in order to rank this album in the middle of their discography, because it's actually one of my favorites, and I really want to put it higher on the list. But personal love aside, I must admit that it's not Testament at their most powerful. So that's at number 8, Nate. I gave it a number 10 for my ranking.
I'm at number 9.
So look at that, 8, 9, 10. We're all in that ballpark. Now, here's where things go sideways, Nate. Ruthless Metal, it's their worst. Quest for Metal, it's their worst. Darcy 6 Strings 9 Lies, the worst. Injustice for Earl, the worst. Metal Music Meltdown, Nate, their worst. That's a home run, 5 out of the rankings at the worst at number 12. The average is 10.8. When it shakes out, that makes it the worst. So it slides down 4 spots. Even after this flowery, the guy wanted to rank it higher. He kind of couched it with a number 8. I mean, by all means, if an album strikes you stronger, then pull it up there. But, put it up at a higher ranking. I've done that where I've just given it bonus points for there's just something about this album that I have to give more bonus points for. This one's definitely not there because I'm at number 10. You're at number 9. And this guy gets number 8. Everybody else blasts it out of the water and says it's their worst, which I'm surprised at.
I really like James Murphy as a death metal guitarist. And I know they kind of dip their toes in the water of death metal vocals on, like Low and this album. It doesn't work for me as much. They did what they did, and they're not bad. They're not bad albums at all, but they're also just like The Legacy in some ways, where it's not as catchy, or there's not as many memorable moments that make you want to keep going back to hear it as something like, The New Order or the ballad on Practice What You Preach and stuff like that. So it doesn't work for me, and it's a little disappointing because I do really like James Murphy. And, of course, Gene Hoglan being an addition is pretty awesome.
Yes.
I think this is the only album, too, that they had a bass player who was just completely outside of, because otherwise they work with Steve Giorgio or Greg Christensen, but they had this Derek Ramirez playing bass on this one. And there's no second guitarist. It's just Eric.
Yeah, just Eric. Yeah, I kind of wonder with it. I think that first Lamb of God was many years after this, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. I'm not well versed on their discography, but this is new metal is exploding at this time. With bands like Korn and Cold Chamber, and you can probably name 10 more. I know you're big fans of all those bands, Nate.
This guy. I want to mention that '90s stuff because
yes,
he says that in the he talks about being the '90s and how metal was being perceived as dying, but I don't really agree with that. I know we've disagreed with this before, and I'm certainly no music historian, but as a fan, I mean, Pantera was one of the biggest bands in the 90s for a lot of the 90s, and they were very heavy.
Yes.
Nu metal is still metal, whether you like it or don't like it. It was just another, expression of metal. So there was just, and then all the underground bands, or not so much underground, but the hardcore ones like Slayer and Overkill and, Testament here, they're putting out some heavy stuff. It's not their most stellar stuff, but it's still like good heavy records. But the real shit was still going on. I think the core of metal is just too relatable for it to die out.
Agreed. Yeah, it just wasn't. It seems like if the record industry isn't interested in it, it's dead to everybody. Even though the fans are packing stadiums, or they're packing up theaters, or they're packing clubs, it's still going. And obviously it's bigger in Europe. So that's one thing, is we see it a lot of times with our American eyes, and then we're watching Europeans and people in South America having these monster festivals and drawing these big bands, and keeping the pulse. It still has a pulse. It's still going. It's not dead. How many times has it been counted out? Metal was counted out when Van Halen started, the band that saved heavy metal. And then it went through the 80s, and it was counted out, with hair metal, but yet then, you're still dealing with your Slayers, your Big Fours were still going strong. Bands like Testament coming up, Exodus, Overkill, we're never going to be out of it's dead. People are always going to be counting it dead, but they're never going to check for a corpse.
When we talk about the core stuff of metal, I'm not talking about the little pop, outcrops like nu metal, where that's doomed to have its little popularity and fade out. You know what I mean? It's just, it was popular culture type. It appealed to, college bros who wanted to fucking drink and fight or whatever like that. So, but these other bands, like, if you're a fan of Testament or Slayer, especially Slayer, Slayer fans are fucking rabid Slayer fans. I used to think of it like a fucking religion, how much I love those guys when I was young, So that core of metal has those type of fans, and it's going to continue on. I don't see it dying. So anyways, back to the point of the 90s, that metal definitely got pushed aside after its late 80s popularity, but it never died out. And then it had a resurgence, as we were talking about, like with Dark Roots of the Earth, for instance, with Testament. That's a fairly recent album, and it fucking kicks ass.
Hell yes. Well, yeah, and then what is it? 2 years? When was that again? Dark Roots of Earth? What year? Over here. Dark Roots of Earth is 2012. So that's 2 years after Overkill had released that, when they came out strong with the Ironbound.
Yep.
And really started to get people, just like grab people and going, Overkill is freaking back, baby, or they're not dead, or, hey, where's this Overkill? That's one thing too, is I'll point at people who like, well, I checked out when Bobby left the band. I'm like, okay, go to 2010 then, grab that album. And I would do the same thing with Dark Roots of Earth. I'd say, okay, if you were listening to Testament in the 80s and maybe early 90s and you gave up, grab Dark Roots of Earth and give that a spin, and then work your way around that time frame.
At number 7, we have The Formation of Damnation from 2008. The early 2000s marked a long stretch of inactivity, difficult times for Testament, as it took nearly a decade for the band to release any new material following 1999's The Gathering. Besides the 2001 re-recordings of selected tracks from their first two albums represented on First Strike Still Deadly, and a somewhat shaky reunion of the original lineup on 2005's Live in London, the band was barely hanging on for dear life. It was during these years that Chuck Billy had been diagnosed with cancer, and Eric Peterson was staring down the possibility of closing the book on Testament. At one point, Eric admitted that if guitarist Alex Skolnick had been unwilling to return to the fold, that would have officially marked the end of the group. During this time, Peterson was also exploring a more symphonic black metal-infused sound with Dragonlord, recruiting some of the same members that appeared on The Gathering. Fortunately, Testament's story didn't end there, and the band attempted a second reunion with Alex and original bassist Greg Christian. This time, however, original drummer Louis Clemente was left out of the fold in favor of Gene Hogland, for what are probably obvious reasons due to anyone with ears. The formation of Damnation was one of the highly anticipated albums of the year, so expectations were high, and for the most part, those expectations were met. It's a very strong album and supported on the strength of the first single, More Than Meets the Eye, possibly the best Transformers-themed metal song of all time. It also included some memorable deep cuts such as Henchman Ride, Killing Season, and Fear. Not to forget the album closer, Leave Me Forever, that included a bass groove and riff style that would have fit right in on Low. I'm at number 7 on this one.
So right there with the list, I too am at number 7. And we're not alone. We got Ruthless Metal at number 7. Then we got some people who liked it a little bit better. Quester Metal number 6. Even more so, Darcy 6 Strings 9 Lives at number 5. And the hardest hitting one, Injustice for Earl, drops it at 9. The worst ranking in the system, but there's one better. Metal Music Meltdown gave it a number 4. So now the scores shake out, Nate. This one is part of our tiebreaker. Comes in at number 6. So you and I, we both are simpatico on this, and this one does slide a little bit, but because there was so many good rankings, it got in with the tiebreaker. But I based on yours and my rankings, it's had to slide back into for the tiebreaker at number 6. Still pretty dang respectable and almost in that top 5. And yeah, it was a definite return. You know, when I mentioned Overkill at 2010's Ironbound, this is kind of like, oh my God, Testament are back. The album's way better than their previous output, in my opinion, and of course in the opinion of some of these other people.
This is when I started buying the album, buying Testament again and listening to them again, I guess, giving them some attention. And also now going back through this for ranking purposes, it reaffirmed to me that Alex Skolnick is absolutely an integral part of Testament. You just can't take him out of the equation. They're just not the same without him. So I know there's a lot of bands that can change members and still carry on and have really good success and still kick ass. This band, they need that dude in the band.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't know if it's something the way maybe he pushes Eric, or if he just gives him like little things like, hey, that's a cool riff, but what if we did this? I don't know what it is, but
he brings a more flair to it, if you will.
Yeah, and he's a great musician.
With his leads and stuff, and the feelings, like especially like there's a bunch of that on the New Order, and it creates a lot of atmosphere. I don't know. He brings all that type of stuff. Eric doesn't have any of that with Testament when Alex wasn't in the band. And none of the other guitarists that he brought in did either, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think they did some good work, but as a whole, the band is stronger with Alex in it. Definitely. You know, in my notes, I have something, and I don't remember off the top of my head what it was, but in The Evil Has Landed, I know there's some lyrical pieces that are in there that I kind of question on. Like, really, you couldn't have found a better way to say that? But I didn't docket points as a result. But just a couple things that I wish I would have noted exactly what those were that bugged me so much. But the only note I have is that there are lyrical issues for me on this one. But I still gave it a good score. And this one's got a little bit of swing here and there as far as songs. There's some really strong pieces in here. And then there's a few that's like, I kind of pull it back a little bit. Oh, and then they come back strong again. So this album definitely doesn't feel like it finishes weakly as a result. But there you go. Number 6. So it rises one spot. Next on the list, at number 6 on the list, is Titans of Creation from 2020. And there's a lot on this one. This guy's got a lot of notes here, so buckle up, kids. With the exception of Brotherhood of the Snake, I think all the Testament albums released since 2008 are on pretty equal footing, but I'm not going to put this one at the top of that pile for now because songs like Night of the Witch and City of Angels are some of the best songs the band has ever released, which is a difficult thing for any band to do after so long in the game. One of my favorite things about Titans is the inclusion of Eric Peterson's screeching vocal style. Eric did the vocals for Dragonlord, which was never included in Testament, and I find that to be a welcome change that adds a new element to Testament's sound. The reason the album sits in the middle of the list is because while those songs are great, I'm not sure how much of their other material will call for a lot of repeated listens. It is possible that if you took best material from Brotherhood and the best material from Titans. See, this guy wants to cut everything up into fucking EPs. They're mishmash. Jesus Christ.
I know.
So if you put all that together, you could probably create one of the best thrash metal albums of the last 5 to 10 years. As it stands, it's hard not to feel like the band have been writing the same 3 songs over and over for a long, long time. That's a statement I can kind of agree with when it comes to their middle ground material, their C material. But I digress. I want to take a moment to give a bit of a bird's eye view on Testament's whole discography and levy a major critique against their music. Without a doubt, these guys are some of the most talented musicians in the whole heavy metal genre, but they don't take a lot of risks with their music. So much of their material lands in the same sonic territory in that they are almost always in a medium-high tempo. They never go Mach 7, but they also never really break down into some creepy, crawly, doomy metal riffage, and I find that to be a bit disappointing. Well, that's not the Testament sound, you say. And you're right, it's not. But that absence isn't because of a lack of ability, it's because, as a group, they actively avoid adopting that style as part of their sound, which, to me, makes them seem like a band that has rules as to what kind of elements can be incorporated into Testament's music. If I had one complaint about Testament as a whole, it's that they seem to play it safe a lot of the time. Nate, I think we'd agree at that, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of great bands that stayed in their lane.
The downside of being a reliable artist is that you rarely surprise the audience. Testament is not the kind of band that ever seems to elicit a strong emotional response in the listener in the same way of their peers. You know which ones I'm talking about. For most metalheads, Testament is a good band, but rarely are they anyone's absolute favorite band that they will defend to their death. I sometimes wish I would see someone respond to their music with more than, yeah, that's badass, or yeah, that's pretty good, I guess. I think it's great when...
Before you, I know this is a really long write-up. I just wanted to interject here that I feel like during that New Order era, there were hardcore Testament fans, but I understand what he's saying at the same time, because I've got that kind of passion towards Slayer that I don't really apply to any other metal band to that level.
Yeah, and I think the same could be said towards Overkill. I think you're going to get your core fan base, and although I feel Overkill fandom is stronger than Testament fandom, would you agree with that statement? Or am I seeing it?
I would agree with that.
Okay. I just wasn't sure if I was seeing that through my Overkill fandom. But it seems like you see a lot of the same people at Overkill shows, and it seems like it's a strong thing where Overkill comes by themselves. Testament usually are packaging deals together. They're currently on tour with Creator. And I think that's a good pairing. Testament and Creator going on tour. Hell yeah.
I feel like Bobby Blitz's vocals are a style that you really have to be a fan of that to listen to it. It's not general consumption type vocals.
Like Hetfield.
Yeah, and Testament's definitely not as... They're a little more approachable vocally that way. But
yes.
I think just because of the inherent nature of their sound, it would tend to just lend to have hardcore fans that are into Overkill. It's probably not a lot of casual Overkill fans, I guess is what I'm saying, compared.
Yeah, I'd say they have a stronger heavy-duty fan base, but that middle section, I think Testament beats them there because you get a lot of more broad. They're painting with a broader brush, and adding those death metal vocals might even draw in some people, and then kind of push some people out too, as a result. But it adds a little variety. So let's finish this up here. Here's what's left of what he had to say. I think it's great when a band has a group of diehards that will support them through whatever, and a group of adamant haters that will never enjoy what they put out. Sounds like Overkill. That kind of passionate response is a product of artistry that is lawless, undeniably honest, and from the heart. I hate to say it, but Testament has never seemed to have achieved that kind of response. The band just exists where they're at and basically hit the glass ceiling. All of that is just my personal opinion on their career and is no way meant to disrespect any of those guys. I have nothing but respect for them as individuals and as musicians. I just wish that even for one album, this band would throw caution to the wind and really try some wild, wacky ideas in the name of artistry without worry about how it will impact their fans, sales, or the business side of Testament. And I really actually, I wish he would have saved that for like a sonata, kind of a overall broad write-up at the end of it, because I agree with everything, and I think you're on the same page there. I don't know if they hit a glass ceiling, but because I think there's been some growth since I think Formation of Damnation has definitely helped to right the ship and put Testament back into where they belong in the pantheon of thrash metal. But he's got a good point there. I think there's not like that diehard people carving Testament into their arms type of fan base, and I don't think there's a lot of the haters where they rail against it. And you get that with Metallica, you get that with Slayer, you get that with Overkill, Metallica, Anthrax, Megadeth, Exodus. That's another one that has like the rabid fan base, and then it's got people that just hate it. So they do have that kind of spectrum. Where I don't know if Testament does.
Yeah, and I think, in my opinion, a lot of the music side of Testament is good enough to draw more rabid fans, but I was just trying to find words for it, I guess. But I'll just say that Chuck Billy's not believable on a lot of his vocal delivery in some way. He sounds good or whatever, but sometimes it almost sounds off or doesn't quite fit. Whereas, like, if you've ever seen Overkill live, you see how Bobby puts like every fucking bit into every song.
Yes.
You don't get that with Chuck. You know what I mean? And so for me, that's a big part of it. But music wise, and I will also say that I feel like he's done a better effort on the later albums, and the lyrics have been better. And as a result, I feel like I'm a little more gravitated towards some of those when Alex came back, and now his vocals are fitting more about what he's singing, I guess.
You know what? You reminded me of something when you're talking about Billy really selling it. And thank you, because that's when I went back to review Dark Roots and I was listening to Native Blood, I was expecting a stronger, more emotional, there's something I was expecting from Chuck on that album, because he does have Native Blood, and that song is about he's written, the Trail of Tears, that's a song about the plight of the Native Americans. And I was expecting something a little bit more on that performance based on what I remembered, that like, hey, Chuck is Native and here's a song about Native Blood again, specifically titled Native Blood. And I was a little let down on the performance on that one. And so you're right. Everything you just said is very poignant.
I'm going to dance gently on the edge of this here, but that song, I agree with I would have the same. Like, he's going to have passion because of his history, and he's going to put this passion into a song, but it actually sounds contrived, like Cannabusiness in a way, where it almost seems more like he feels like, I should write a song like this, rather than being compelled by some deep side of himself to write it. But I don't know that. Maybe he was deeply inspired, and just as a vocalist, he can't put that emotion into it in a way that carries over to the listener.
I bet you, and I should refer back to this, and this will be something I'll think of as I'm editing this. I want to go listen to live versions of this and see if that's something he pulls off in a live setting, that maybe the studio isn't where Chuck excels when he sells the song to you, like you're talking about Bobby Blitz doing that live. That's actually what made me a bigger Overkill fan, was seeing Overkill live. It's like, holy shit. And I do enjoy Testament live. I've seen them 2 or 3 times, but they're not a draw to me where I'm going to go see them like on a regular rotation, like with Overkill. And I think that's part of it. I think that's one thing that is lacking, is that live performance, that maybe he doesn't always pull it through. I think he just he's awash in the success that they have without like pushing himself to just draw you in like somebody else, like another artist can.
He's always good live, Chuck. He's always, when I've saw him back in the 90s and current times, I've seen him probably like 3 times. He always sounds really good live. I wanted to tell a story too about Testament because I saw them open for Iron Maiden.
Yes. Roy Wilkins?
Yes. I believe it was the Fear of the Dark tour for Iron Maiden. But
I want to say you're right.
This is the only time I've seen seating on the main floor at a metal show and people started ripping out the seats and threw them in a big pile to make a mosh pit. I was sitting up on the balcony watching it, and I never saw seats on the floor at a metal show at Roy Wilkins ever again after that. You know what I mean? It was like, I don't know. They didn't know what the fuck to expect, apparently.
I'm trying to pull that up because I think it was the same tour.
Yeah, because the other time I saw Iron Maiden before that was at the Target Center, and that was for the No Prayer for the Dying tour. And I definitely saw Iron Maiden for Fear of the Dark tour. And I'm pretty sure it was Testament that opened.
Oh, this sucks. All the fucking...
It would have been Souls of Black.
All of the search fucking things are all about trying to sell me fucking tickets. I'm looking for a classic show. I purposely put in a Fear of the Dark tour. And they're like, buy tickets. Next thing, buy tickets. Fuck you. I'm looking... The fucking internet. Sometimes I tell you.
Yeah, isn't there a go-to site for...
Yeah, I thought that... Oh, this one's with the reunion tour. Yeah, crap. Well, I don't want to dig too deep, but I think you're right. I feel like that was the show when we were both at it, because I know I saw Iron Maiden on Fear of the Dark tour. I just was wearing the T-shirt not that long ago. I pulled it out of retirement because it still fits, and although maybe it's a little bit extra fabric because I've lost some weight since then, but I'm in the wheelhouse. But you know, one thing we never did get to, Nate, is the actual rankings for the
Right.
Titans of Creation. Yeah, we just went on this whole tirade, and we followed the artist or the writer on his whole path, and that's why I wish he would have saved that. He should. I like what he's saying there. I just wish he would have saved it to the very end instead of going off on this tirade during Titans of Creation. What does the guy think? He's a podcaster, for Christ's sakes? Come on. So back to the scoring. He has it at number 6. Nate, I have it at number 11. Second to the worst on my list. Where do you have it?
I've got number 8.
Ah, so not too far from where I'm at. Ruthless Metal, number 10. Quest for Metal, number 9. Darcy at number 7. Justice for Earl, number 7. And the best score in the whole list, actually beating the list, surprisingly, which is Metal Music Meltdown at number 5. But when it all shakes out, it does still drop. It drops 3 spots to number 9 from number 6, with an average ranking of 7.88. So I'm glad to see that one slide back a little bit, because I felt 6 is, I mean, you're almost in the top 5. You're talking, come on. I mean, there's no cannabis on here, so I'm grateful for that. But
so that's an improvement.
Yes, and that's why it's not my worst bank. That's why Brotherhood, that one just sank that album for me.
Number 5, Practice What You Preach from 1989. I could see the look on your face now. Dude, Practice What You Preach is one of their best albums. What the fuck? And I agree with you. I'm kind of an asshole in that way, because most people would put this record in at least the top 3 Testament albums. When I was 17, I would have, for sure. Fortunately, over time, tastes change a bit, and you're allowed to evolve and change your mind. And so with respect to that, I got to put Practice right here. Again, I repeat, there's no bad Testament albums, but the reason I've knocked it down a couple notches is that I grew to like the New Order a lot more and gained a lot of respect for some of their other records. Make no mistake, it's a killer record with some of their best songs. The title track for sure, and Sins of Omission is surely one of Testament's most underrated songs, along with Nightmare, Coming Back to You. The album's closing instrumental, Confusion Fusion, fucking rips too. Let's be honest here. Testament in the late 80s is still some of the poor man's Metallica. And unfortunately, is just no way to avoid those comparisons. As much as they've put out some great music, they're still pretty closely behind Metallica. Some years later, they would diverge from that path, which brings us to...
And, of course, that's going to lead into the next one, which we're not going to get there. So, Nate, he has it number 5. Where you got it?
I got it at number 3. I'm one of those top 3
well,
fans.
I'm tops on the whole list. This is my favorite Testament album. I have it at number 1. And I am the only person with that number 1 ranking. But we've got some others. So you're at number 3. We got Ruthless Metal right there with you. Quest for Metal, I should say, at number 3. Quest for Metal at number 4. Darcy at number 2. Earl at number 2. The worst ranking, which shockingly, I'm surprised anybody who put this outside of their top 5, but somebody did. Metal Music Meltdown has it at number 6. However, with all those good rankings, it comes in at number 2 with a 3.25 average. This one, I figured this would probably be my best, but when it all did shake out, it is. And I'm curious, I'm going to look at my notes here. Oh, by the way, before I get sidetracked here, Nate, Iron Maiden, Testament, Corrosion of Conformity, 1992, St. Paul Civic Center.
Yeah, and Corrosion had those Vote with a Bullet stickers floating around out there. I expected this to be my number 2.
Oh, really?
Album, but when I did the ranking and I saw that Dark Roots came in just a little bit, it was very close. I decided to just leave it that way because I really enjoyed that later album. But anyways, this was definitely one I listened to very heavily when it came out, and the ballad is still my favorite song by Testament, which is on this album.
Yes, that's definitely killer song, and really set the bar for I don't know if any, I guess I'd have to go back and look, but I don't know if any other thrash band in any ballads have achieved what Testament has achieved with their ballads.
I don't think so. I remember being at the Burnsville Mall in Schmidt Music, and there was a guy in the sound room playing a guitar, and he was playing this song. And, tablature existed during those times, but it was very, very limited, and there certainly wasn't songs like this being put into a tablature magazine and stuff. So that meant that this guy listened to it and figured it out, and me being 16 or whatever, I was just completely blown away by seeing that.
Nice. Yeah, I did find in my notes, or I shouldn't say I finally dug it up. I just wanted to look between my number 1 and my 2, and Practice What You Preach has a over 1 solid point above my number 2. So it's not even like a neck and neck. I mean, it's still pretty close, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't a photo finish is what I was kind of wondering between my 1 and 2. But yeah, it's just a solid number 1. And this one, they should be remastering and re-releasing this album. There's no reason this album hasn't. They finally did New Order, and I'm grateful for that. But now, get on it, whoever, Jesus or whoever's going to charge of this. Somebody's out there.
Jesus.
Come on. It's Practice What You Preach. It's a religious album, isn't it?
Yeah, it's got a cross on the front. Or people in the cross.
In that pose. Jesus Christ pose. Little bad Motorfinger reference.
Nice grunge reference there, Gene. Killed metal in the 90s.
I like the idea of, I don't know who said it. I came off of Baco's podcast, but it was, it didn't kill hair metal, but it walked into the room and with a gun in its hand, or to find the smoking gun or something like that. I forget how that worked out, but at any rate, carrying on with the list. Yeah. So that one, Practice What You Preach, master list at number 2, gaining 3 spots. Thank goodness. That should definitely, the guy had a top 5, so I guess there's some respect there, but his comments regarding the New Order, I think I agree with that album, to me, going back and revisiting, it was like, dang, I think I may have overlooked this one for many, many years.
Yeah, I went backwards on that one too, because Practice What You Preach is where I started listening to Testament. I saw other people wearing like T-shirts and stuff, but when I actually started listening to it was Practice What You Preach.
Yeah, and I'm there too, but what I did was I never really went backwards. I shouldn't say never, but it took me many, many years before I went backwards. Like when I went to Puppets, I immediately started backtracking, and Overkill, same thing, Horoscope, and then I started backtracking. This one, I stuck with Practice What You Preach, and I just kind of kept riding with Testament on their forward wave and never dug too deep into New Order and Legacy. And that New Order, when revisiting it more recently in the past 10 years or whatever, since we started doing the podcast, it was like, that's not too shabby. And then buying it on the re-release remaster was even more eye-opening. We're like, dang, this is a pretty solid album, and it's pretty nice. So their progression between Legacy and New Order was like some bands like Megadeth, where it's like, oh, that was a nice jump, or Metallica, and think of it, Anthrax. So many bands where that second album just jumped ahead so much as far as production values and stuff. All right, moving on here. Coming in at number 4 on the list is 1994's Low. Low is an extremely important record in Testament's discography. This is the first the band stepped away from that tendency to shadow Metallica. This is the first time they dared to find their own sound and style and go heavier than ever, which was pretty significant for the time. Heavy metal music was in a strange place culturally, with so many of the 80s bands being dropped by their labels and left in the dust. While Testament was still on Atlantic Records, Low would ultimately be the last time they were signed with a major label. That didn't mean a whole lot, since the label did basically nothing to support the album anyway. However, this record is where the band started exploring a more death metal influenced sound that remains as part of their sound today. Low also marked the departure of original drummer Louis Clemente and guitarist Alex Skolnick. In their places, the band recruited drummer John Tempesta from fellow Bay Area thrashers Exodus, and on lead guitar, James Murphy. Clemente was a capable drummer, but Tempesta had a much more intense and skillful approach that gives Low a much more impressive rhythmic foundation. It would be difficult to say whether Skolnick or Murphy is a technically better guitarist. They're both extremely talented. The fact is that Murphy's death metal style was a lot fresher and more relevant to that era. For all intents and purposes, the Testament sound was reborn with down-tuned guitars and Chuck Billy's step into a more vicious vocal style, and it's quite obvious how inspired and energized Chuck sounds. Everything, including the lyrics, took a darker, more sinister turn, and goddammit, it works. The album perfectly marries the band's thrashy roots to the more modern death metal future, and only the most dedicated old-school thrash metalers would dare to argue that. The band was even able to keep a ballad on the album with Trail of Tears, which might be the best ballad they've ever written. The title track, All I Could Bleed, and the instrumental, oh boy, how do you say that name? Uratsukabochi? Doji?
Yeah, something like that.
Round out what I feel are the album's standout tracks, but it's a very strong record from front to back. Metal Nation has it as the best ranking out of all of our rankings at number 4. Nate, I have it at number 6.
Wow, I'm at number 12 on this one.
Well, hey man, you're not in very
definitely the worst.
That is the worst out of all the rankings. You hold that solo spot there, but you're not very far off from others. Ruthless Metal number 11, Quest for Metal number 10, Darcy Six Strings right there with me at number 6. Earl has it at number 11, and Metal Meltdown at number 9. Average ranking of 8.63. When it all shakes down, it drops 6 spots, and rightfully so, to number 6. I'm actually surprised this is sniffing my top 5 at number 6, but there it is.
Yeah, I'm surprised as well. This might be one where I get super stoned and listen to it, where the critical part of my mind is kind of kicking back, and see if I have a different opinion of it.
Yeah, but like I said, man, you're right up there. Ruthless Metal number 11 and Justice for All at number 11, Quest for Metal number 10. And then number 9, I mean, that's a lot of, you're kind of in the wheelhouse of some of the other people. So there's only 3 of us that were sniffing the top 5. I mean, and one breaking in with Metal Nation at number 4. There.
Well, I want to like it more just because I like death metal.
Yes.
I love James Murphy, and this has some of those elements. And so I was just kind of let down when I listened to it that it didn't, kick more ass for me.
If somebody,
it is what it is.
If somebody would have asked me what Nate would have ranked this album before I saw your ranking, I would have said it would have been somewhere near your top 5.
Yeah.
Just based on all the
Never
reasons
can
you
tell.
mentioned that it felt like it should be up there, it did not hit the spot for
They're
you.
just not a death metal band.
Yeah.
That became its own thing. You know, there was a lot of variety, but there was still all a sameness to it. And they are not part of it.
Yeah.
People would disagree.
And I think if you're going to do death thrash, I think you got to get a little bit more chaotic. And Testament's just a thrash band that decided to add some death metal elements to it. And at times it does work. And, you know, I like when he uses that voice more as a, you know, a little bit of salt. You know, if you throw too much salt in there, then all of a sudden you're like, well, now you're just making a pretzel. I didn't order a pretzel.
Yeah. Yeah. When he just has some elements of it, it works.
Yeah. A little spice.
All right. This one is a little bit of a shocker for me, honestly. But number 3, we got The New Order, 1988. The New Order is considered by many fans to be the absolute best Testament album. What Ride the Lightning is to Metallica is what The New Order is to Testament. And it's a fair comparison as both releases are sophomore efforts by each band respectively. Songs like Trial by Fire, Into the Pit, and Disciples of the Watch all remain staples of the band's live performances, and rightfully so because they fucking kick ass. There once was a time where even I would mark this as their absolute best release, so why do I have it in my third best now? Well, because even though it's a fantastic record, you can tell it was heavily influenced by Ride the Lightning. Testament were very similar to Metallica. Man, he really beats that drum. And a few years younger, so they found themselves walking in the footsteps of their older brothers. Where Metallica dared to forge a new path on their own, Testament always a few steps behind them, fully capable musicians in their own right. They were still essentially finding their own unique sound. Now, if you're a seasoned fan of both bands, you'll hear some stylistic differences, but similarities are too great to ignore. The other thing that I think brings the New Order down an inch is the inclusion of their cover of Aerosmith's Nobody's Fault. It's actually a great cover, and I really enjoy the song, but it also means that there was an element of the record that isn't truly original. I would levy the same argument against Megadeth's inclusion of I Ain't Superstitious on Peace Sells But Who's Buying. Personally, I believe that the inclusion of a cover on the standard track list of any studio album is automatically disqualifies it from taking the number 1 position in a band's discography. In my book, it has to be a complete original piece of work. Covers that are reserved for bonus tracks, re-releases, and live shit, that's just my personal outlook. Yours may differ. I agree with the Megadeth comment, and I have some news about the cover, or some information I pulled from Wikipedia, that they added that song because their contract stated that their album had to be 40 minutes. So the like the musical interlude pieces, those were added after the fact, as well as this cover, because they didn't have a long enough album to fulfill the contract.
Huh.
And I think all those musical pieces, I mean, I think the cover is fine, but yeah, you know, I can see what he's saying, but all those interlude pieces, those really add to that album for me. But I have this in my number 1 spot.
Hot dang. I have it as my number...
Along with a handful
my
of
number
others.
3. Yeah, you're not alone in there. I have it as my number 3. And if you would have asked me 10 years ago, I would have said that'd probably be more towards the 10 side of things. But it is a solid album. I'm right there with Metal Nation as far as my scoring. But you, my friend, you're in rare air there with... we got a few number 1s in this one. Actually, everything is 1s and 3s. So we go Metal Nation 3, Gene 3, Nate 1, Ruthless Metal 1, Quest for Metal 1, Darcy 6 Strings 9 Lives 3, and Justice for All 3, Metal Music Meltdown 1. So that, the evidence right there, it averages at a 2, and that makes it the number 1 Testament album on our new revised list, even making it better than all of us 3 people. It's a solid album. And I like the Aerosmith cover. I mean, yes, it would be nice if they would have had a song that was their own to put in there, but it doesn't sync the album like I Ain't Superstitious does for Megadeth.
Yeah, I used to like that song on that album too when I was younger, but now when I listen to it, it's like, God, you know.
Yeah, and I like Nobody's Fault when I first heard it. When this album was, when I got my hands on it, I remember thinking, oh, I dig that. That's a good cover. And it's a good Aerosmith song, and I think Testament did justice by it.
I didn't know it was an Aerosmith song when I had heard it on this album. I came to find that out later.
God, I wonder how I knew.
I was never into Aerosmith, so I wasn't familiar with a lot of their stuff.
This may have been one that maybe after I heard it, somebody said, "Oh, that's an Aerosmith cover too," or something. I don't remember. I knew it was a cover, but I don't remember for it. I felt like it was early on. I knew it was a cover because it was like every time I listened to the album, I'd be like, "Oh, there's that Aerosmith song." It kind of, there was always that little asterisk, like, "Oh, hey, I like the song, but it's an Aerosmith cover." Yeah, so that's good information. I'm glad you had that. God, what does it clock in? I wonder if I'm going to check my notes here. See,
it's still like on Wikipedia. It's still said under 40 minutes, like 39 minutes 22 seconds.
Yeah, I got a 39:19 as a whole
Okay.
with all that stuff. But it's still great thrash time.
Also, Disciples of the Watch has been played like 600 times live. It's their like most played live song.
Wow. I can see it. I wouldn't doubt it. Great song. Somebody should name a podcast after that.
I know, right? Somebody should have thought how cool of a name that would be for a podcast.
Write that down, Nate, so don't forget. Coming in at number 2, 1992's The Ritual. The Ritual is not often placed this high on the list of fan favorite albums, but I think this one takes a lot of undeserved criticism. Going back to what I wrote about the New Order being Testament's version of Ride the Lightning, many fans might say The Ritual was their attempt at following Metallica's lead on its 1991 self-titled Black album, ripping off Spinal Tap, by the way. A more mid-paced record that tries to reach for mainstream acceptance, and perhaps that's true to an extent, but is that really such a bad thing? Metal fans have this romantic notion that they get to keep their favorite band small enough that they feel special just for being a fan of the band, as if they're clued into some secret hidden from the rest of the world. I agree with that statement, Nate. The problem is that any band that's going to be able to keep making music has to be able to play to more than you and the other 12 metalheads in your town. On one hand, fans complain that mainstream is full of shitty rap and 3-minute pop songs, but then anytime a rock or metal band starts to gain momentum, they turn their backs and call them sellouts. Mainstream acceptance is a fine line that is difficult to walk for any metal band, and they usually can't do it for long, but I've never found much sense in shitting on a band for trying to widen their audience without completely abandoning their key elements of their sound, which is exactly what Testament did on The Ritual. Agreed. What I like about The Ritual is that it has a pretty unique identity within the band's catalog. Where the New Order and Practice were sister records, and Souls of Black was a lesser version of those two albums, The Ritual saw the band rework their sound ever so slightly. Where the New Order included an Aerosmith cover, it's on The Ritual where Testament takes that 70s hard rock influence and transforms it into a more muscular metallic version. The band sounds energized and intent on undoing any damage they may have done to themselves with Souls of Black. Wow. While most thrash fans have an unhealthy obsession with everything needing to be faster and faster, the fact is that a lot of heavy metal sounds best at slightly lower tempos. Black Sabbath would be an example, Nate. Oh, here they mentioned that.
Yep.
I didn't see that.
He does, yeah.
Black Sabbath, the inventors of the genre, rarely play what would be considered fast by today's standards, and to continue the comparison to Metallica, songs like The Thing That Should Not Be and Sad But True tend to pack the biggest wallop in the live arena. Perhaps it's not just the lower tempo themselves, but the dynamic of having a variety of different speeds scattered throughout a concert. A sign of true musical chemistry is where the band can lead the crowd through a sonic journey by pacing their show. I agree to that. Some bands will open up with a full-on blistering face melter. Sometimes it's a slow build-up, and there are peaks and valleys over the course of the show. That isn't so prevalent with opening acts, but once the band reaches the point in their career where they're playing longer sets, they have to be able to conserve some energy to make it to last an hour or more. It's easy to play at breakneck speeds the whole way through a 25-minute set. Not so easy when you're going for an hour and a half. Even if you can physically pull it off, it still causes a bit of ear fatigue in the audience. Ultimately, No one stays 21 forever, and any band that sticks around long enough will eventually want to mature into a more dynamic version of themselves. Almost all guitarists will at one point find it's not about how many notes you can cram into one measure, but about squeezing the most grit and feel you can out of the strings against the frets. However, it's not as if Testament were going down a route of spacey, effects-heavy psychedelic music. It's rock and roll, and it's still heavy metal. This album really lets Peterson solidify his role as rhythm guitarist, and Alex Skolnick continues on this path towards Shred City. Some of the leads on this record are the tastiest solos he'd ever laid down to that point. Greg Christensen is laying down some great groove, making up for some of Clemente's simple but effective beats. There are occasions where Chuck Billy sounds like he's not entirely sure how to sing over slower, more spaced out chord changes. There are certainly some points where it seems like he may have had far too many beers and could have given the track a bit more from the gut. The title track verses seem like he's searching for something, but he hasn't quite figured out what to do. However, he sounds as good as ever on songs like Electric Crown, Let Go of My World, and As the Seasons Gray. Almost getting there, Nate. It's not a perfect record, but rock and roll isn't meant to be perfect. As a listener, it's a satisfying listen to hear a band try to stretch their sound a bit. If you recall earlier in this diatribe, he says article, I'm saying diatribe, I wrote how I felt Testament often failed to experiment with their sound. The Ritual isn't extremely experimental music, but it certainly changes the formula that had grown a bit tired over the course of 4 very similar records. Winding up here, Nate, The Ritual, in my mind, is the original Testament striving to create the absolute best album they could, and it's that drive for success that makes me rank it as their second best record. Nate, number 2 for Metal Nation. I have it at number 2 as well.
I have it at number 6.
Number 6, so just outside your top 5. Ruthless Metal at number 4. Quest for Metal having it at the worst, tied with Another at number 11. Darcy Six Strings at number 8, and Justice for All at number 10, and Metal Music Meltdown at number 8. This drops 6 spots from number 2 all the way sliding back to number 8. Ouch. Those 11s didn't help.
I feel like it's a little harsh, but I didn't help it either. I didn't have the greatest ranking.
Yeah.
But not as bad as an 11 or a 10.
And I think for every reason this guy talked about in that huge write-up that I just worked my way through, I agree with everything he said, and I think that's why it ended up so high on mine, because it was kind of shooting for putting all their eggs in that basket. Like, let's just really hone a great Testament album to be an homage to everything we've done up to this point, but let's modernize it. And I think it worked. It worked for me back then, and I am shocked it's at my number 2, but damn, it is at number 2.
I love the song The Ritual. It's definitely one of the standout tracks for me in this, as well as Electric Crown. But I wanted to say about he keeps comparing the Metallica similarity, and I just was remembering that both Kirk Hammett and Alex studied with Joe Satriani.
Yes.
And so they do come from a similar source, but so I can see what he's saying there a little bit. Not just because of that, but Alex definitely brings his own flair to it.
Yes, and I think that fits very well in what Testament does. I couldn't see Kirk Hammett in this band, but then again, Kirk Hammett was on a different direction with Metallica from the 90s on. So, I think Alex was able to satisfy, doing his Alex Skolnick trio, doing the jazz stuff and whatnot. But, everything he brings to Testament is just so damn solid.
They stayed in the thrash groove where Metallica did not.
Yep. There are 2 different paths on this one, definitely, from where the Metallica went and where Testament was heading. And you're talking almost the same time. This was 1992. Metallica, if I'm not mistaken, was 1991. Did he mention that there? Yes, he did. Yeah, 1991, self-titled. But surprising. I'm looking at my personal notes here, or not notes, but my scoring and my ranking, and it wasn't. It was a little bit closer from my number 2 to my number 3, but it still wasn't like a photo finish. But it definitely the New Order was keeping up pretty close to The Ritual, but Ritual just takes it. Great album. Yeah, I liked it when it came out. I'm shocked to find it so high on my list. And being simpatico with where the guy is, and we were the highest ranking. So we have two number twos, and we have two number 11s that almost wash themselves out right there. So everything balances up between 6, 4, 8, and 10, and then boom, ranking of number 8. Ouch. But the scores are the scores.
I feel
Nate.
that's a little harsh, but oh well.
Yeah, I agree.
Number 1, this one, we haven't discussed it yet. It was a little shocking to me that this is the number 1.
Yes.
And that is The Gathering from 1999. The Gathering marked a quantum leap forward, not just for Testament, but for thrash and death metal in general. At this point, Testament's lineup is essentially a superstar group of some of the best musicians to ever make more metal music. Once again, James Murphy returned to provide a wealth of lead guitar shit, 5 years more advanced than he was on Low. In between Low and The Gathering, Murphy released an album called Dreams of the Carrying Kind from his own death metal outfit, Disincarante, as well as 2 solo albums, 1996's Convergence and 1999's Feed the Machine, featuring guest appearances from not only Chuck Billy but also Devin Townsend of Strapping Young Lad. On bass guitar, the band recruited Steve DiGiorgio, who had also done work on Murphy's solo albums, but also gained a mass of experience as a founding member of Sadus, then joining Fucking Death, who basically are the most important death metal band of all time. At last, but certainly not least, The Gathering boasts the talents of fucking Dave Lombardo of Slayer. With a lineup like that, it would be pretty much impossible to make a shitty record. Go back in your mind to the year 1999 and ask yourself, what are the biggest names in metal were doing at that time? If you think about it, it was actually a pretty dark year for a lot of metal bands. Metallica was neck deep in their mainstream rock, radio rock era, writing songs for the Mission Impossible 2 soundtrack. Slayer had just released Diablos in Musica 1 year earlier, an album that many considered their career low point, which I disagree with. Megadeth released Risk in 1999 as well. Anthrax was all but dead in the water. Sepultura had just split with Max Cavalera. Even relative newcomers, Machine Head just jumped the nu metal shark with 1999's The Burning Red.
Oh.
Not even the Mighty Pantera was active in 1999. Dude, even Alice in Chains and Soundgarden were defunct by 1999. I guess if you were into Red Hot Chili Peppers or Limp Bizkit or Korn, you were in good shape. But if you liked fucking metal, it was tough times indeed. Not to say that there were no good metal albums released in 1999, but things were definitely in a slump. You had to dig into the underground to find anything worth a shit. Of course, Testament was pretty far off the mainstream radar, but as they did have name recognition in the world of heavy metal music, when you have a lineup as they did, you're bound to attract a bit of attention. In my estimation, The Gathering is just as good as Master of Puppets. It may not have the widespread recognition that Metallica's name brings, but on a purely musical level, it ups the ante on every single aspect of the Testament sound. It has all the necessary ingredients to make a fucking sick album, and it puts them in just the right quantities to make it delicious. The raw talent and amazing performances from everyone involved makes every song badass in its own unique way. The record possesses a crystal clear production that had a direct influence on how many thrash and death metal bands were produced going forward, and even today, over 20 years later, it still sounds fresh. Very few records can say that the sound still holds up so many years later. Master of Puppets holds up, Rust in Peace holds up, Death, The Sound of Perseverance holds up, The Gathering holds up too. With a lineup of some of the best musicians in the genre, an album full of extremely well-written songs, and a high-quality production value, it's pretty clear that The Gathering has hands down the best Testament album. And I have it ranked at 10, and after hearing him talk about it, I feel like I should have it much better ranked. Jeez.
Yes. But putting it up there with Master of Puppets and Rust in Peace and The Sound of Perseverance? Come on. I mean, I
missed something.
I have it ranked better than you by 2
good.
points. I have it number 8. You have it at number 10. And I was shocked. Ruthless Metal number 6. Quest for Metal number 3. Darcy 6 Strings 9 Lives at number 4. Unjust for All number 5. Metal Music Meltdown number 2. Holy shit, Nate. What are we missing?
There's only 3 of us who are outliers for top 5.
Yes.
you know, you just can't say, hey, all these guys are together, they're going to be awesome, and then it is so.
Right.
You know what I mean? I listened to it. I guess, you know, I should maybe give it a fresh listen, but in right light of his comments here, but it didn't do it for me, I guess, as much.
Yeah, you and I are pretty damn close there, 8 and 10. We drag it down when you look at all those scores. But, you know, it's still in the top 5. Once everything shakes down, it drops 3 spots to number 4. But so it's still in the top 5. But that you're right. It kind of makes me want to just throw the CD in my car because I drive an antique and I still have a CD player, and just kind of listen to it in that frame of mind instead of with my ears kind of perked up to a worst to best mentality. But still, putting it up against Puppets and Sound of Perseverance and Rust in Peace, come on. That feels like sacrilege to me. Oof, duh. Well, Nate, so when it's all said and done, here's how the things shake out with our brand new rankings. All of the Disciples of the Watch podcast. Oh, wait, hey, that's our name. we use that name. Shit, I could cross off this note. All right, well, here's the new ranking. So, starting at number 8 and sliding back to number 12 is Demonic. At number 11 is Brotherhood of the Snake, dropping a spot. Low is dropping 6 spots to go to number 10. The Ritual drops 7 spots to go to number 9. Ouch. That hurts, man. One that picked up some spots is Souls of Black, and coming in at number 8, picking up 4 spots. Titans of Creation dropped a spot. Still surprised that's up that high, but there it is at number 7, Titans of Creation. Coming in at number 6, The Formation of Damnation picked up a spot. Number 5, Dark Roots of Earth, picking up 4 spots to gently slide into that number 5 slot. Then we have, here we are, everything 5 on up. The Gathering was at number 1, dropped 3 spots to go to number 4. The Legacy was ranked at number 11 to fly into the top 5 and get at number 3. Practice What You Preach was given a rank at number 5, but it finds itself in the number 2 spot now. And at number 1, just all 1s and 3s, ranks at number 1, The New Order from 1988. Hot damn.
I could live with that a little bit.
Yep, definitely some shifting, but that's one thing I was so surprised at, just the broad spectrum of Testament love. You know, some people really dug that late 90s output, and it's showing here in some of these rankings. And I mean, I'm actually surprised even some of the love that the more 2 recent albums, because Formation of Damnation and Dark Roots of Earth were so cool, and Dark Roots even just picked things up even more so, that I feel like they've slid since then with the last 2 albums. So I'm really excited to hear this new album because I'd like to see them capture that. But there are people who still feel Titans of Creation and Brotherhood of the Snake are good albums. I'm not really in that camp myself.
Neither am I.
I could go find my Low CD, or not Low, but the Gathering CD, and put that in my car. Wow, that's a shocker. So when the new album comes out, Nate, maybe with giving a fresh spin to that album, I'll be curious to see if it creeps up a little bit. I don't see it jumping up that much though, for either of us. We heard what we heard. You know, it wasn't like I'm sure I can speak for you. I was paying attention, and I'm sure you were as well. Yeah, I want to make sure that I feel pretty solid with my rankings, but the love that album got from these people was surprising to me. I was not expecting that. So any recap on your side, Nate?
No, not really. We kind of talked through it all throughout the ranking, but they have, you know, out of a collection of 12 albums, you know, like 9 of them are really, you know, listenable, and the rest are a little less interesting.
Yeah, and that's one thing too, is I was hoping that being from not listening to Brotherhood of Snake and Titans of Creation, I was hoping that maybe with fresh ears that those ones would be a little bit stronger for me, and it just didn't pan out. And I figured Brotherhood, because I just remember when we did a track by track on that one, and I just remember feeling like Testament has lost their groove, man. Because Formation of Damnation, Dark Roots of the Earth, and all of a sudden, boom, one of their worst albums in my opinion, it was their worst album. And I mean, I'm not alone because it finished at number 11 with all the rankings. The highest was a couple of 8s, which, so be it. Titans was a little bit better, but not by a whole lot on my ranking system here. But it was cool to do this because it really made me kind of reflect on how big of a Testament fan that I am, and I realized they're in that C, about that C tier for me. I mean, if you're going to go through it from A to D, maybe a C plus.
I like them better than Exodus.
Same, yeah, I'm right there with you.
Many people are very into Exodus.
And like I mentioned earlier, the Exodus has one of those love them or hate them kind of fan bases, or anti-fan base, maybe I should say, on the other side of that spectrum. But Testament, not so much. Yeah, they're kind of that the neighbor that everybody likes, but nobody wants to spend time with.
That sums it up.
Wow. I don't know where that came from, but I like it. All right. So, Nate, we got to end with this song. I picked the song on this one. I wasn't sure if you had any designs on it, so I thought I'll throw one in there and see what your thoughts are.
That works for me, man.
I figure it's kind of fitting that the Disciples of the Watch podcast is going to use, and it's from the New Order album, which finished on top, and it's the Disciples of the Watch song, which is a great tune and a cool name for a podcast, I would say.
I would say so.
All right, so if we've got nothing else, I think we're just going to wrap up with that. I suppose I should say, don't forget, people, check out the other episodes. We got all sorts of good stuff that's been out. Time Travel Radio just put a wrap on 1981. Real deep dive into the 80s catalog there, or 81, I should say. Man, I listened to that one. I'm on my second or third listen to that episode, just revisiting some of the deepest, darkest bowels of rock and metal in 1981. There's some pretty cool stuff in there. Even our brothers over in the In Obscuria podcast were shouting out on that one, putting a comment on there how much they appreciate that, because those guys love that obscure stuff. And boy, I just gave them a huge heap and helping of obscurity on 1981 to part 3 there. Good stuff. I know I have a special guest coming up on My Life in 4 Songs, all sorts of stuff. You get it on the podcast, dotwpod.com, just to subscribe to it, end it. Auto download it, then you don't even have to think about it, and you'll become best friends with us here on the podcast, relatively so. You'll be the best friends that we like, but we don't want to spend time with. How's that sound, Nate?
Sounds great.
And of course, on occasion, you can catch me on KFAI at KFAI 90.3 FM here in the Twin Cities and at KFAI.org. I covered all, Nate. Oh, Patreon. We're looking for more love on Patreon, so if you want to support the show as little as $1, you can always subscribe to the free stream, but on occasion I'll put some stuff out there for free on that site as well. But for as little as $1 a month, I mean, come on, $12 a year. People spend that in one coffee trip, maybe 2. So throw some money down, support the show. Patreon, we have our at dotwpod.com, or just search for us on Patreon. We're Disciples of the Watch. I think it's all spelled out on that one. But let's wrap up, Nate. Disciples of the Watch is the song. Disciples of the Watch is the podcast. The album is The New Order. The band is Testament. There you go, worst to best. Until next time, my friends.
Obey, or I'll take you to the cross.
Thank you for listening to Disciples of the Watch. This episode was produced by Gene Vogel and Nathan Matnich. All music is property of the artist or the publisher. Please buy music and support the art we all love. Editing on this episode was done by Gene Vogel. Check out our website, dotwpod.com, for show notes, links, and more information on the show, as well as connections to social media. Don't forget to subscribe to the show using your preferred podcast application, or use our FeedBurner RSS feed listed on our website. Plug it into your browser or whatever app you're using, and then you will get all of the goodness moving forward. And you can also download the show as MP3 files from dotwpod.com. If you'd like to support the show, please click on the support us link at our website. As well, we have Patreon, so you can do a monthly contribution if you so desire, or purchase some of our merch from our website. Thank you for listening, friends, and stay heavy.